I'm sitting in my Chicago office at 9 p.m., watching the city freeze, when my phone lights up with the warmth I'm not allowed to touch. It's an Instagram photo of my family at the Winter Gala, fire roaring, champagne flowing, everyone smiling. I wasn't invited because I work too much. But then, a second notification slides over their happy faces. An email from my father. He doesn't want my company tonight. He wants $58,000 to save my brother's truck from repossession. Before I show you exactly how I audited my own family and the accidental lien I found on their mansion, drop a comment and tell me, what time is it where you are right now? I want to see how far this story travels. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't text my father back. I closed Instagram. I took a breath, and I felt a switch flip inside my chest. The hurt didn't disappear, but it crystallized. It turned into something hard, cold, and useful. I opened the PDF attachment again. This time, I didn't look at it as a sister being asked for a handout. I looked at it as a fraud examiner looking at a crime scene. I scanned the document numbers, the interest rates, and the delinquency history. Tyler hadn't made a payment in 4 months. The loan was already charged off by the primary lender and sold to a secondary collections agency. To them, this wasn't a luxury truck anymore. It was a toxic asset. Most people see a demand for $58,000 and panic. But I saw an opportunity. This is what I call the mathematics of mercy. Here is the secret the banks don't want you to know. When a loan goes bad, the bank just wants it off their books. It ruins their ratios. They will sell that debt to collection agencies for pennies on the dollar, just to recoup a fraction of their loss. I realized I didn't have to pay the full $58,000 to save the truck. I could do something much smarter. I could buy the debt myself. I have a dormant limited liability company I use for consulting work. It has a generic, corporate name that wouldn't raise any red flags. I picked up my office phone. It was nearly midnight. But the asset recovery firm listed on the notice had a 24-hour line. I dialed. My voice wasn't the voice of a neglected daughter. It was the voice of a bored, high-level portfolio manager. I told the agent I was looking to acquire a bundle of distressed auto loans, and I had a specific interest in this VIN number for a client. The agent sounded tired. He looked up the file. He saw a truck that was about to be a nightmare to repossess. He saw a debtor with 0 credit and no assets. He saw a loss. I made my offer. I wouldn't pay the $58,400 my father demanded. I offered $12,000. Cash. Wired within the hour. The agent hesitated. He countered at 15. I held firm at 12. I told him he could take the $12,000 now. Or he could spend the next 6 months chasing a kid who spent his money on crypto and champagne. He took the deal. I typed in the wire instructions. I authorized the transfer from my savings account. It was a significant chunk of my money. But it wasn't charity. It was an investment. At 12:15 in the morning, my printer hummed to life. It spit out the assignment of debt agreement. I picked up the warm paper. I stared at the signature line. The reality of what I had just done settled over me like a heavy coat. I had not paid off my brother's loan. I had purchased it. Technically, legally, and financially. I was no longer Tyler's sister. I was his creditor. And I owned the note on the Ford Raptor he was currently driving to the gala. The progress bar on my laptop screen crawled forward. Transferring funds. Verifying ownership. It was a silent, digital transaction. But the noise in my head was deafening. While the banking system processed the wire, I sat back in my ergonomic chair and opened a different kind of file. It was a mental ledger I had been keeping since I was 16 years old. I looked at the signature on the loan document I had just bought. Tyler's signature was a messy scrawl, the mark of someone who had never truly feared a consequence. I remembered when he signed the lease for his crypto mining startup 2 years ago. My father liquidated a retirement account to fund the servers. When the market crashed and the servers became expensive paperweights in my parents' basement, they didn't get angry. They took him to dinner to cheer him up. Then there was the drone photography business. That cost $15,000 in equipment. Tyler flew the drone into a neighbor's pool on the first day. My mother laughed and said he was just spirited. She wrote a check for the damages. I looked at my own hands resting on the cold glass of my desk. These hands had scrubbed dishes in the university cafeteria to pay for textbooks. When I was accepted into one of the top forensic accounting programs in the country, my father told me he was liquidity constrained and couldn't help with tuition. I took out loans. I worked nights. I graduated with honors and zero fanfare. They didn't come to my graduation because Tyler had a crisis with a girlfriend that same weekend. For years, I told myself it was just favoritism. I told myself they just loved him more. But sitting there in the dark, watching the debt assignment finalize, I realized it wasn't about love. It was about economics. There is a concept in behavioral economics called the sunk cost fallacy. It describes our tendency to continue investing in a losing proposition solely because of what we have already put into it. We throw good money after bad because stopping would mean admitting that the initial investment was a mistake. That is exactly what was happening with my parents. They weren't protecting Tyler because they believed in him. They were protecting their own egos. They had invested 30 years of money, excuses, and reputation into the idea that Tyler was special. If they let him fail now, if they let him face a single real-world consequence like a repossession, they would have to admit that their entire parenting strategy was a bankruptcy. They were terrified of that emotional foreclosure. So, they kept paying. They kept enabling. They kept throwing $58,000 at a truck to keep up the illusion that their investment was sound. I wasn't just the sister anymore. I was the external auditor, and I had just identified the fraud in their family business model. The computer pinged. A green checkmark appeared on the screen. Transaction complete. Title transfer initiated. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't fear. It was the sensation of a burden lifting. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the safety net. I wasn't the backup plan. I held the paper. I held the debt. And unlike my parents, I wasn't afraid to close the account. I closed my laptop. The city lights of Chicago twinkled below me. Indifferent and beautiful. I didn't go home. I stayed in my office, waiting for the sun to rise, waiting for the inevitable phone call that would start the war. I was ready. The ledger was finally open, and I was going to balance the books. My phone rang at 8:03 in the morning. I was already at my desk, reviewing the quarterly fraud reports for a commercial real estate client. The sun was streaming through the glass walls, bright and unforgiving. The caller ID said Dad. I let it ring 3 times, not out of fear, but out of preparation. I took a sip of my black coffee, set the mug down on a coaster, and swiped answer. What did you do? There was no hello, no good morning, just my father's voice, tight with the specific frequency of anger he reserved for inconveniences he didn't understand. Good morning, Richard, I said. My voice was level, almost robotic. I had practiced this tone in the mirror. It was the voice of a consultant speaking to a difficult client. Don't play games with me, Lauren, he snapped. I just got a notification from the bank. It says the loan on the Raptor has been closed and the debt has been assigned to some third-party holding company. I told you to wire the money to the bank. Did you screw up the routing number? Did you try to negotiate a payment plan? He didn't know. He saw the notification that the debt was sold, but he didn't connect the dots. He assumed incompetence on my part because that was easier than imagining I had agency. I handled the situation. I said, "The bank has been paid. They no longer hold the note." "Well, it looks messy," he huffed, the audio quality shifting as he likely switched the phone to his other ear. I could hear the background noise of the lakehouse, the clinking of silverware, the low hum of morning conversation. They were having breakfast. Tyler is freaking out. He thinks the truck is going to get flagged. He needs to drive it into town today to pick up supplies for the party. There it was. The party. The gala. I said, "It looks beautiful on Instagram." There was a pause. But not a long one. Just a beat of hesitation before the gaslighting routine kicked in. "Oh. That. Look. Lauren. We didn't invite you because we know how you are this time of year. You're always working. You're always stressed. Your mother said it would be cruel to make you drive up here when you're so busy with your auditing." He said the word auditing like it was a dirty habit I refused to quit. "We did it for you," he continued, his voice smoothing out into that fake, benevolent baritone. "We wanted you to have a quiet weekend to catch up. Besides, Tyler invited a few of his influencer friends. It's a different crowd. You wouldn't have fun." I looked at the paperwork on my desk. The assignment of debt. The repossession order I had drafted but not yet sent. "So, Tyler needs the truck for the weekend," I repeated. "Yes," Richard said, impatience creeping back in. "He's taking some promo shots with it. It's important for his brand. I need you to call this holding company, whatever it is, and make sure they know the account is current. Fix the paperwork. Lauren, I don't want any glitches while we're entertaining." He didn't ask if I had spent the $58,000. He didn't thank me for allegedly spending it. He just wanted the asset clear for the photo op. The lack of remorse was absolute. It was a vacuum where a conscience should have been. "I understand," I said. "I'll make sure the current lien holder knows exactly where the truck is." "Good," he said. "Get it done. And try to get some sleep. Honey, you sound tired." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. He thought he had just managed an employee. He thought he had delegated a task. He had no idea he had just confirmed the target coordinates for an airstrike. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the urge to call my mother and beg for an invitation. I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. They wanted the truck to be the center of attention, fine. I would make sure it was the most memorable part of the weekend. I opened my email. I found the contact for the repossession agent I had located earlier that morning. He was local to Lake Geneva. He had a tow truck that could handle a heavy-duty Raptor, and he worked on Saturdays. I typed a new message. To Mike's Recovery Services, rework order #4492 status green light. Location, the driveway of 4400 Lake Shore Drive. Note, the keys are likely with the debtor. Do not engage. Just hook and book. I hit send. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a transaction. They wanted to fix the situation. I was about to fix it permanently. I turned back to my monitors. The spreadsheet was waiting. The numbers were black and white. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what they added up to. Retribution. I put the phone down. I didn't slam it. I didn't throw it. I placed it gently on the desk, right next to the stapler. My father thought the conversation was over because he had issued a command. He thought I was scrambling to call the bank, begging some mid-level manager to fix a clerical error. He thought I was doing what I had always done, fixing the cracks in the pavement so he could walk smoothly. He was wrong. The conversation was over because I had just authorized the extraction. I didn't leave my office. I pulled up a second monitor. I logged into the asset tracking portal Mike's recovery services had provided. It was a simple map interface. A blue dot moving steadily north on Interstate 94 toward the Wisconsin border. That blue dot was Mike. He was driving a flatbed tow truck with a hydraulic lift. He wasn't a family friend. He wasn't an enabler. He was a professional who got paid upon delivery. I watched the screen for 2 hours. It was the most peaceful 2 hours I had experienced in years. I answered emails. I reviewed an audit for a logistics company. I drank another cup of coffee. All the while, the blue dot moved closer to the Winter Gala. At 10:45 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text from Mike. Asset located. Driveway is full of luxury vehicles. Blocking is tight. But I can get the angle. Proceed. I typed one word. Proceed. I closed my eyes and let myself imagine the scene. I knew the layout of the lakehouse driveway perfectly. I knew exactly where Tyler parked the Raptor. He always parked it front and center, right near the entrance. So every guest had to walk past it. It was his trophy. It was the physical proof that he was a success. Bought with money that didn't exist. The guests would be arriving now. The brunch spread would be laid out. Mimosas. Imported cheese. My mother would be wearing her pearls. Apologizing for my absence with a sigh that suggested I was ungrateful. Tyler would be posing for photos, leaning against the grill of the truck, filtering his life into a golden hue. And then, the diesel rumble of a tow truck would cut through the laughter. My phone buzzed again. A photo message from Mike. It was a grainy, low-angle shot from his cab. The Raptor was hooked. The back wheels were already off the ground. Then, the chaos started. I didn't need to be there to see it. I could hear it through the frantic vibrations of my phone. Tyler was calling. Then my mother. Then my father. Then Tyler again. I let them ring. I watched the names flash on the screen like desperate distress signals from a sinking ship. I pictured Tyler bursting out the front door in designer loungewear, yelling at a tow truck driver who was just doing his job. And my mother, Cynthia, not panicked about the debt, but terrified the neighbors would see a repossession in her driveway. For her, financial failure was survivable. Public embarrassment was not. Then Mike texted, asset secured. Subject attempted interference. Police threatened. Subject retreated. ETA, 90 minutes. I leaned back, listening in my head to the fading car alarm. Tyler's influencer friends had probably filmed the entire meltdown, their curated weekend collapsing under the reality of a repo man. I breathed deeply, lighter than I'd felt in years. But I wasn't done. As they screamed outside, I returned to the loan file and froze at paragraph 14. Subsection B. A cross-collateralization agreement. I read it twice, then smiled. Richard hadn't just guaranteed Tyler's truck loan. He had pledged equity in the lakehouse, the family shrine. Defaulting on the truck triggered the lien on the property, and when I bought the debt, I purchased every right tied to it. I now held a junior lien on their beloved summer home. The truck would auction for maybe $40,000. The remaining deficiency would leave more than $18,000 unpaid, and as long as that balance existed, I held leverage over the lakehouse. They had unknowingly handed me the legal power they spent decades denying me emotionally. My father texted a command disguised as an invitation. We're coming Monday. 9 a.m. Clear your schedule. He thought he was summoning a subordinate. He was walking into a deposition. I spent the weekend in my office, combing through every document. By Monday, the conference room looked like a courtroom. Repo receipt, loan agreement, highlighted clause, notice of default waiting to be filed. Richard and Cynthia entered furious, humiliated, and still convinced they held the upper hand. They didn't, until I explained the clause. I watched Richard pale as he realized he'd gambled the lakehouse for a discount interest rate. The numbers were simple. After auction, fees, and interest. The debt sat at $62,000 until it was paid. The lien stood, and foreclosure was mine to initiate. Cynthia panicked first. Richard followed. I issued the terms full payment wired by Friday, or the house went on the block. They begged for 30 days. I gave them 5. At 4:55 p.m. Friday, the wire hit $63,250. They had sold whatever they needed to preserve their sanctuary. I filed the release of lien without comment and blocked all 3 of them from my phone. That night, I went home, poured a glass of wine, and sat by the window overlooking Chicago. The silence felt earned clean, costly, and mine. People romanticize forgiveness. They insist family is sacred. But sometimes family is a pyramid scheme. And you're the only one paying in. They're probably at the lakehouse now, calling me a monster. Let them. In a narcissist's story, the person who sets boundaries is always the villain. If being the villain protects my peace, then I'll wear the title like armor. The ledger was balanced, the debt was paid, and the silence was worth every penny.